Welcome to Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. I am Melodie Bissell, the president of Plan to Protect and the co-author of the bestseller Plan to Protect, a protection manual for children and youth and a protection manual for those that work with them. We are in for another treat today as we are completing our 4-part series on caring for the vulnerable during COVID-19. The first 3 weeks, we focused on children, youth, and the elderly. Today, we are honored to have Archie Allison with us. Archie Allison is a legendary figure at Toronto Variety Village, a center that helps with disabilities develop a healthy lifestyle through sport, fitness, and physical activity. I've known about Variety Village for many, many, many years. Archie began his career working with persons with disabilities when he was hired as program instructor at Variety Village in 1984. I think that's about the first time I started hearing about Variety Village. Throughout his years at Variety, he continued his studies and training and is currently the Director of Access and Awareness. During his career at Variety Village, Archie assisted in creating many children's programs and also programs with individuals with disabilities. These programs focused on providing all children, regardless of their abilities, with barrier-free environment and a curriculum in which to play. Archie was an active coach in track and field, taking athletes to the Windsor Games and Junior Games in Miami. From 1985 to 1990, he established integrated leadership camps, providing opportunities for teenagers of all abilities to learn from their peers and gain independence from practicing important life skills. In his current position, Archie leads a team who deliver integrated outreach and physical education programs to over 10,000 students in Ontario each year. He is particularly noted for creating a fun learning approach to get people involved in parasports. He is also the recipient of numerous awards and has been inducted into the Canadian Disability Hall of Fame and the Toronto Sport Hall of Fame. I believe one of the most recent awards was his induction into the Canadian Paralympic Hall of Fame, which recognizes and celebrates those who have made a significant contribution to the growth and the development of the Paralympic movement in Canada. Welcome, Archie. That is quite the bio. I think we're out of time.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're joining me today for this timely topic. But before we begin any questions, I want to do just a huge shout out to Variety Village. Variety Village is one of our members at Plan to Protect, and I have loved coming to Variety Village and supporting the work that you do there. Can you tell us just a little bit more about Variety Village?
Absolutely. Thank you, Melodie. What a great introduction, and maybe sounds so popular. Wow. This is a great experience and opportunity to be part of this podcast, so thank you for inviting us. Variety Village began as a vocational school in 1945. It was one of the first vocational schools to include people with disabilities in the community. So learning through education and through employability skills, many of those people that were students at the school at the time are still members today, and their grandchildren are members as well. So in 1981, the school started to include people with disabilities in the education system more frequently and regularly. For us, we decided that we wanted to take a movement and promote sport, fitness, and training for people with disabilities with a field house, which is a large gymnasium. And then in 1989, we opened our pool. In those years, we've had a number of people from around the world coming to visit us to learn more about how to create inclusive and accessible programs, designing accessible features in a facility, and including people of all abilities together. So we're pretty excited to be where we are, and we have an incredible team of people that we work with, an incredible membership base that join us weekly, and a lot of guests and visitors that come to learn more about inclusive play, inclusive participation, and accessibility options to include in their community, school, and workplace.
I really think you were one of the leaders, Variety Village, in inclusive play. And now we have many clients in North America asking us how to create that safe environment, integrating inclusiveness. So thank you so much for leading the way on this.
Well, thank you.
So, Archie, tell us, how have you spent the last 6 months during COVID?
So COVID was a lot of a surprise for everybody. It was a very concerning situation that we were in. So we closed our facilities and programs in March. Our facilities remained closed until July. At that point, we reintroduced our day programs with limited numbers and a reduced capacity. Typically at summer camp, we reach about 300 children a week, um, kind of included in sport, recreation, play, and participation opportunities. This year, we were trying to keep the numbers much lower. So we had about 10 participants per camp, and we had a scheduled rotation throughout our facilities, which you can travel through and from so that participants could attend camp safely and enjoy the benefits of play. It was interesting because the families and the feedback from the families for the summer was that we were as Variety Village creating such an incredibly safe place for people to play and respite for parents as well in a way that children can enjoy summer, enjoy camps, enjoy sports and recreation as well. So July and August were day camps. When day camps concluded, we opened our membership base again. A little bit different than we typically do. Typically, we have about 6,500 members of all abilities joining us to exercise and be active. Our numbers we reduced significantly to meet health guidelines. So our weight room is a separate entrance for people to use with a capacity of 10 people per hour. Our members book online. They use the facilities safely and guided by a staff member. While in other areas of the building, we have similar numbers to keep our numbers low and safe for participation kind of with traveling to and from each area. Last week, we reopened our adult day programs. Again, with instead of a 16 person participant base, we reduced it to 8 people per day. The program filled very quickly, and we also are following all the safety guidelines to ensure that people can participate safely. And we got the best compliment just this morning, actually, from one of the participants who just returned and said this is his best day ever because he hasn't been able to see his friends since March. So we're kind of evolving and we're following the recommendations that are available and we're meeting all the safety guidelines. We're providing a place where people can be active again. During those conversations, we're finding that so many people have been alone since March and haven't had a lot of conversations, a lot of support, a lot of introduction to anything other than just being alone at home. So it's taken a significant impact on people and the people that are returning now to be active and use the weight room, the cardio room, the pool, or the gym. They're all kind of sharing the same stories that they're super excited to be out of their home in a safe environment with other people as well.
So, how has COVID impacted the work you do, even outside of Variety Village, like Paralympics and other initiatives for those with disabilities?
Yeah, I think most events now are canceled or postponed, some as far as 2022 at this point. So the Paralympic Games were rescheduled from this year to next year, 2021. And we're seeing how things progress and evolve from there. We have a lot of athletes that have been training incredibly hard to reach their goal of being on the Canadian team and representing our country at the Paralympic Games that's been put on hold. And the hope is that they will continue to train and compete and be able to compete next year at the Games. In our volunteer community, we're finding a lot of events and fundraising initiatives have been also postponed or canceled. Small businesses are struggling to stay open. Larger corporations are struggling to maintain kind of financial security. And for us, that kind of plays back to charity because it impacts their giving and their time as well. So for us, it's impacted us a number of ways as an organization and in the community as well. With my volunteer involvement too, most programs have been canceled or rescheduled, resulting in, again, people at home, people without a lot of support that they would typically access or use. And again, that feeling of loneliness and isolation as well.
Sorry, so sorry to hear that it's impacted Variety Village, from even a funding, corporate sponsorships. I know I've been to a number of your fundraisers, And I know how much you depend on those corporate sponsorships and the giving of others to even be able to sustain this. But I also can imagine how disappointing it would be for the athletes to know that, the Paralympics have been canceled or postponed for a couple of years. And just trying to help them understand that in many cases is a challenge. It's hard for any of us to understand it. But when you face some of those restrictions and disabilities, it would be very, very difficult to understand. So, Archie, what are some of the challenges that individuals with disabilities are facing during COVID? I really want our audience to take a few minutes and really consider the impact that this has had on individuals with disabilities. Can you help us understand that and get a picture of what you deal with when you're talking to some of your athletes?
Absolutely. Every individual, being an individual, has a unique situation that they find themselves in right now. So for our families with children with disabilities, without school or with the variation in school delivery, either virtual or in person, there's a lot of impact on family cohesiveness as they are. So during between March and up until recently, children were at home with their families and trying to do virtual learning, and parents were juggling schedules between either working, being laid off, and trying to kind of do all the things that our incredible teachers do. So for a lot of kids with disabilities at home during that time, it was a significant impact on their learning. For children that had parents that were working, some of those parents would have been impacted by employability changes, either layoffs or subsidized wages or other. And that's also impacted kind of what they're doing in terms of kind of their home, their living conditions, and other. As children with disabilities are older, I find a lot of the calls I'm getting are just loneliness and isolation. And I mean that in saying that a lot of our youth were very socially active with other people of all abilities, and together they were establishing kind of routines or ideas or activities they can enjoy together. Some being sport, some being recreation, some being social. So for a lot of people with disabilities, the stories that they've shared with me have been that they've just been feeling very lonely and isolated through this time. Adults with disabilities, for adults that are working with disabilities, some have been impacted with job changes, um, job suspensions, lack of job opportunities, and other. And I think for a lot of people individually, they're all kind of facing different issues and concerns that they're trying to resolve, address, understand in some cases. And I think it's really been significant impact on a lot of people of all abilities.
I agree. I have a good friend, and her son is in his early 20s, and he works, volunteer works in two or three different locations. But what they found is he was told not to come into work and not to even come in to volunteer. And he just could not understand it. He couldn't understand why he couldn't go and work. That was probably the highlight of his day. And he just doesn't have the outlet for activities that many of us have. So, Archie, tell us what you believe some of the greatest needs are among individuals with disabilities at this time. What are those needs? And um, we'll talk in a few minutes about how we can help meet those needs. But I'd love to hear what you think some of their greatest needs are right now.
Hmm. I think the greatest need for people with disabilities is to have a voice at the table. I think a lot of times stakeholder groups and discussion groups don't always involve people with disabilities. And through this pandemic, we really kind of saw that there was a lot of gaps in how we were communicating, how we were sharing, and how we were working together collaboratively to address the situations that we're in. So I think that the greatest thing right now is to kind of recognize that we need people with disabilities to be represented in our stakeholder groups, in our consulting teams, and in all of our conversations to know what types of things could impact either um, our involvement on a day-to-day basis at school, in the community, or workplace.
I think something you said is just that representation is key, whether you are a community agency, whether it's a workforce, whether you're a church or congregation, you've got individuals within your community that have disabilities. So give them a voice and allow them to sit at the table and be able to speak into what their needs are. I think that's key. We're always considering risks at Plan to Protect, and statistically, I know that individuals with disabilities have a much greater risk of injury, harm, and abuse. So, what do you know from your experience are some of the risks that individuals with disabilities face on an ongoing basis?
I think for a lot of people with disabilities, if they're isolated and alone, it's someone to reach out to, someone to connect with, and someone to ask the question: what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, and what can I do about it in those cases? So in the field of abuse or harm, knowing that your voice will be heard, and knowing that you will be believed, and knowing that people will provide the support and resources that are available to ensure that you can communicate that information as well. For many people that are nonverbal or have language skills that vary either through sign language, through using symbols to communicate or other, it can be difficult for people to understand what that individual is trying to express or share. But it's equally as important that we find people that can understand and listen to and help to make sure we're hearing those voices and we're understanding what people are saying. So it's vital to the community, it's vital to individuals, and it's vital to our resources to know that we want to be there to make sure that people are heard, listened to, and supported.
Listen to is such an important word, and it's something I often stress here at Plan to Protect. And it's been sort of that reoccurring theme, even in this series of how to help and provide care during COVID-19, is that word listening. Sometimes we're so eager to provide programs and activities or keep people active and provide, you know, programs and activities for them that we never take the time to say, tell us what you would like. How can we meet your need? What are the programs and activities that you would like? And also asking the question, do you feel safe? Is there ever a time that you don't feel safe? How can we help you feel more safe? I think that is really key. And I just want to do a shout out here. I am a proud Ontarian because I love the fact that in Ontario, we've got AODA, which is Accessibility Ontario Disabilities Act, right? Isn't that what it stands for, Archie? I'm so proud that we have this in Ontario because it educates and informs individuals on how to interact with individuals with disabilities and provide them accessible workplaces, places of worship, places of program. Variety Village has been accessible for 40 or 50 years, if not longer. The rest of us are just now getting up to date with this, but that AODA training, I think, should be given to everyone, not just in Ontario, but in North America and globally, because it's in that training that you really learn how to interact with different people with different disabilities. And as you said, whether that's sight or hearing or physical, but just to provide that care. Archie, tell me why you think individuals with disabilities have a greater risk of being harmed or abused than individuals that don't have disabilities.
Yeah, I think individuals with disabilities have a greater risk because, again, are they heard? Is an individual with disability heard in what they're saying, and how are they communicating it, and what is understood? I think in the idea of someone who's alone in that situation, do they have someone they can reach out to? Do they have someone they can contact? And if they're abused or harassed, do they know how to kind of identify that, address it, and get the support they need? I think in the community, there's in Ontario, we're very fortunate to have such a great province and such a great country. But I think there's always room to learn and listen and evolve and understand. And we have some incredible leaders in Ontario, as you're saying, Melody, that like a David Onley, who's the former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, who chaired the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and really kind of brings light to those conversations around, are we hearing everybody, and are we proactive, and are we responsive to the needs of people with disabilities in our community to live, work, belong, go to school, and other. And I think it's kind of created this better conversation around, we have to listen better, and we have to learn, and we have to ask.
I think that's so key. And I do think it's heartbreaking to think that when individuals are the most vulnerable, whether they be children, the elderly, or individuals with disabilities, that's when they're at greatest risk of being harmed. And we really need to relook at this imbalance of power and that power differential, because whenever there's an imbalance of power, authority, influence, and control, and even understanding, there is a much greater risk of injury. So I'd like to shift the focus a little bit here. I know that one of the difficulties I have heard is how challenging it is for parents and caregivers to find engaging activities that help their children with disabilities understand a pandemic. So, what advice would you give to any parents or caregivers or extended family members that are listening?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think with a lot of families that we connect with, a lot of families ask questions. They don't always have all the answers, and there are a lot of questions to be asked. But I think the greatest resources are available are other families, right? Or other people with disabilities that can actually share and help you navigate the system to learn and understand what's out there and how we learn from it. I think that as these conversations evolve, we want to know that people can engage in activities and be part of our communities. And I think prior to COVID, there was still a lot of work to be done around how do we create accessible, inclusive play programs, recreation programs, sport programs, social connection programs, employability training, and other. And there's a lot of questions around what that would look like and what that is. So with COVID, kind of bringing us back to being home and safe with our families, is it creating a way that we can still engage in activities together? So the virtual world has really kind of taken off, and there's been a lot more involvement through Zoom and through other social media formats for people to connect. In some cases, for people with difficulty communicating at a rate of speed as others, some people get left behind in those conversations because they're not part of the conversation as it evolves or grows. Maybe not everybody's involved in a conversation like we're having today, so they can learn more about kind of what is out there and what we can do and how we can engage together. I think for a lot of families, it's that ongoing of learning of, where do we find these resources? Where do we find these programs or services or organizations or even people that kind of champion inclusive, accessible activities? And I think that's part of our our community, to make sure that we can all kind of deliver those ideas together, to get people involved and to get people excited about the importance of everybody belongs and everybody can play.
I think that's so important, is just the inviting people into the programs, providing those inclusive activities. How can we be really intentional in being inclusive? And I think it's so important what you just said, even about when we're doing online engagement, that it is very challenging. We found this in this past week. We had invited some people into a Zoom meeting, and one of the individuals was on the spectrum, and she wasn't able to keep up with what we were doing, you know. And we actually invited her father to come and sit with her on the Zoom meeting, and and then we also invited her to stay behind. We went into two of us went into a meeting with her, a room at the end, and explained in more detail so that she could catch up. But it is quite challenging, and it requires a lot of patience, but just a lot of love and care and understanding.
I think you want to make sure that the format's accessible as well. So for people who are blind, they're participating in a Zoom call, they can still be actually part of any conversation. But in
Yeah.
some cases, people have said, oh, maybe the person because they won't be able to view or see you, they wouldn't be interested in this conversation or this Zoom experience. For people who are deaf, is there sign language available? For people who require closed captioning, is that available? But there's accessibility ideas and platforms that we should have in place so that people can participate actively in all the conversations that we can.
So we've got a lot of listeners, Archie, that represent all different types of community agencies. What can the community at large do to meet the needs of those with disabilities at this time?
I think one of the things we're learning, and we should already know, is we all play important roles as organizations and community groups, and together we're so much stronger. So I found that kind of pre-COVID, some groups work together very effectively and support each other and promote each other's involvement. But I think now more than ever, we really need to work together more collaboratively and find out what the strengths and experiences and expertise is that each of us offer, and then platform that together so we can all kind of share in making sure that there's opportunities for everybody to be part of what we want to offer. So that could be at school, that could be in the community, that could be in the workplace. But if we work together as organizations, we're so much stronger than divided. And I think prior to it, I think a lot of HCs are looking for fundraising dollars to keep their doors open, to get numbers of participants in their programs. They can share that experience as well. And I think now more than ever, we've got that chance to kind of say to each other, how do we really kind of elevate all of our platforms together so that we can really effectively engage people of all abilities in our community?
I love the idea of just doing fundraisers for community agencies similar to Variety Village in your community to do a fundraiser. You can do walks, you can do runs, you can do virtual events that are fundraisers, and people are raising a lot of money at this time. Some people, because of the generosity of the government or because they've been able to stay unemployed, but they're not shopping as much because they don't want to go into the malls and go shopping. They do have more cash flow to be able to give generously at a time like this. And I think this is the time that we should be really giving generously to programs similar to Variety Village. So, Archie, you're a prof. I know that you teach at university level. What are some of the best practices that you can give to our listeners that you share with your students?
I love teaching. It's one of the highlights of what I do. And it's always exciting to watch someone kind of evolve into thinking, okay, so maybe I haven't thought about that before, or maybe I can contribute this to the conversation as well. So I find a lot of times as I'm teaching, I'm also learning from the students too. So I find kind of systemically that a lot of the courses I teach are kind of adapted physical activity or adapted programming or other. And we're kind of conditioned to think that people with disabilities are in this pocket over here and everybody else or other people are over here. And I think if we can start to look at engaging people of all those together at an earlier age, we can say, hey, did you know that every person is unique? Every person has their own needs and interests. Every person has their own value they're going to bring to any conversation or any participation opportunity. And when you work with students and you kind of get around that idea and about maybe someone couldn't participate because they have disability, or maybe someone can because they don't, it really gets you thinking more about the person instead of the experience or kind of a category of people with disabilities or people are in different sectors. And when you start to think about every person's going to have their own experience in play or sport, every person's going to have their own exposure to play in sport. Some people just don't have the confidence because they tried a sport many years ago and maybe didn't excel the way their other peers did, and feel kind of that maybe I'm a little apprehensive now to do that again. There's always a lot of questions with sport and recreation and safety and risk and who can play and who shouldn't play. And really everybody can. Everybody should. And everybody can enjoy the benefits of physical activity together. So when you work with students that are kind of in the field of learning about inclusive programming or health care or personal support or even safety, when you're working with students and you kind of know, you see that, oh, I get it now. Like everybody can participate together, and all we have to do is be open, ask, listen, and learn. And kind of the three factors I always go with. ask the person, because the person in your program or the person in your audience is the best person that will know more about them. Listen to what they're telling you, and really listen. So to your point, Melody, when we actively listen, we're not waiting to kind of give an answer. We're just listening, so we're learning. And then if we learn, we can execute something that people can all enjoy together. And it's always fun to watch the students when they reach that platform and they're so excited. And then I've been doing this for a very long time. So many students over the years will say, if you bump into, oh, I work in a business and I started a new accessibility group or advisory group in my organization, or oh, I've started a sports team and I made sure that we had people of all abilities playing together, and we really kind of recognized that everybody wants to play. So we really made an effort to include everybody. And when you hear that, you get reminded that we all know it instinctually that we all have our own personal experiences and how we play and participate, and what types of things make us apprehensive or what types of things excite us in a program. But when you get people together and you really kind of ask, listen, and learn, you can really start to evolve to understand that everybody's voice of that conversation creates a learning experience for you to teach a class that's fun, teach a class that's important, and teach a class that everybody feels involved
I think that there's so many good programs out there that focus on individuals with disabilities. I think we need a lot more. So I want to encourage our listeners to take this time and I hope you've heard Archie's passion and just how he speaks about the importance of good programming and inclusive programming. So take this time to learn a new skill that you can share with individuals with disabilities. I also want to encourage you if you represent a workplace, consider providing an internship or um, having a position where you can invite someone to come into your workplace and do just a task that is very conducive for their skills and their understanding, and give them a work opportunity. Archie, what would you say to a workplace that was concerned about the risks of bringing in an individual with disabilities versus the pros and the cons? What are the pros? Why should they consider inviting someone with a disability into their workplace?
in. I think involving people with disabilities in the workplace is going to be exceptional for any organization, because as as a group and a community, you're getting someone who is qualified, trained, experienced, and dedicated to what they want to do. So I think in the hiring platform, you're really looking at that person rather than disability. You're really focusing on the the expertise, the engagement component of what they want to do and how they can contribute to what you do. I think in working at Brady Village, we've always worked in an inclusive environment where people with disabilities have worked together with us, and there's never been more importance to the expertise and experience that people with disabilities bring. I think we want to kind of get away from thinking about people with disabilities in the ideology that they can contribute, but maybe in some way, right? When really, people with disabilities are us, right? We want to make sure that everybody can um, be employed in a field they would choose to work in, and not be left out because they have a disability as the only reason why they wouldn't be included in a job opportunity or experience.
Yeah, I think that that's such an important reminder for us to consider the accommodations that we should be making, inviting individuals to share with us what those accommodations they are that they need. We will be so greatly benefited, and I think it'll be mutual win-win for everyone. You'll get loyal, committed employees, and you'll be able to be investing in the lives of others, providing them really, really meaningful work. So I just really want to encourage employers to do that, and organizations not to run away from this with fear, but to open their arms and provide opportunities, programs, and activities that are really meaningful, that will be inclusive. I think we are left with the challenge today of the importance of caring for family members also, and either providing some help, some respite care, or even some meaningful activities. We've tried to provide over the last 4 weeks many tangible ideas on providing care during COVID. And that could even be a drive by parade or doing crafts and sending cards in the mail or dropping gift packages off at doors, scheduling Zoom events. Do it safely, do it online, but giving people opportunity to each tell their story and speak. I know this coming month we're even doing a book writing contest. And I think that there are opportunities that you can do with your communities to really demonstrate care. Archie, any final words that you would want to leave with our audience today?
I think it's important to remember every individual is an individual. Every individual is going to have their own needs, their own interests, their own awareness, exposure, understanding, experiences, and again, kind of going back to that piece of ask, get to know the person, right? Don't think of the disability, think of the person. Listen and learn.
Mm. Love that. Ask, listen, and learn. And I think if we have that kind of posture of asking, listening, and learning, um, we'll just have a much more inclusive community and a caring community for everyone. I want to again thank Variety Village. We love partnering with you. We love the work you do. I want to encourage our listeners to give generously to organizations like Variety Village that are really providing great activity and programs that are inclusive for everyone. If you live down by Kingston Road in Toronto near Variety Village, join membership when you can. You'll love the opportunity to do sport next to others. As Archie has said, in many cases, we all have different abilities and different disabilities. So let's just care for each other and really care for each other during COVID 19. Thank you, Archie, so much for participating today. Really, really appreciate this opportunity. And I just want to remind our audience this podcast is sponsored by our Pocket Guide of Best Practices for Individuals with Disabilities. That is a pocket guide that we have at Plan to Protect that we try to get into the hands of as many people as we can that work with individuals with disabilities. It's available on our store at Plan to Protect. Also, our app also includes some best practices, the Plan to Protect app. On our school at plantoprotectschool.com, we've got a number of webinars and seminars for individuals with disabilities. So if you are working directly with individuals with disabilities, those podcasts have been prepared and provided to us by some of our partners and some of our team members that have education and background in occupational therapy and can be real value added for your teams. I want to encourage you, if you found this podcast helpful, share it with others. So share it with others, click the subscribe button and that little button bell to remind you every time that we post a new podcast is on Wednesday mornings. You can look down below at our show notes for a link to both Variety Village and to our store. Archie, again, thank you so, so much for participating today. Really appreciate it. And please send our love back to Variety Village and the team there.
Thank you so much, Melodie.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.